All right. So how many of you have made a boatload of dough on a software startup? I hate all of you. This talk is about a little bit of what I've learned about the psychology of software startups. First, the definition of terms. So by ROI, I'm talking about return on investment. And specifically, to me, that means like all the conversations you have over and over and over about how value is created, what you're spending money on, and why. And that plays out all over the place in startups. So what I found is that most startups I've worked with, whether as a consultant or as a full-time employee, really suck at this. But they do it all the time. I mean, you have a meeting to talk about how you're going to make money, and then you have a meeting to talk about how you're going to know that you're making money, and you just talk about it. Or and some of them don't even talk about it at all. I mean, especially when things start going bad. You know, we're not going to talk about where money's being spent. Why would we do that? So this isn't just something that affects small companies. It's not a big company thing. It just seems to be we don't have the tools to talk about it. So let me give you an example. Disney Interactive, huge company. They spent a ton of money on this game, Pirates of the Caribbean. So the game really sucked. I mean, it did terribly. So what do? I mean, they want to be rational, right? You want to see your ROI. So they engaged my team. I mean, a bunch of big brains who've got all these big, fun, fancy charts and tools, and we gave them a model that could predict when a person would close their account. I mean, how cool is that? You could know before somebody closes that they're about to close it. Well, surely with that, you could like fix your game, right? I mean, you could turn that investment around. Actually, I don't really think it works that way in my experience. So they spent all this money, had a fancy ROI, didn't really play out that way. I mean, if just having numbers and fancy charts worked, then where would Warhammer be? Electronic Arts spent apparently something like $100 million on this within 6 months, and everybody was really looking forward to it. Within 6 months, the game was basically the skeleton crew because it didn't turn out that way. So what they do, they moved that crew from Mythic and EA over to Star Wars: The Old Republic. And they spent $300 million this time. And they thought, well, you know, we've got it all figured out. We had great numbers from this last game. So we can really knock this one out of the park. It's going to launch soon, so I guess we'll find out. But, I mean, to me, it's really basic. And I think the missing piece in a lot of these startups is this human element. It's, okay, I'm putting up all this money. How do I know it's all going to work out? Just tell me it's all going to work out. And then you start to spend some of it. And your anxiety rises, right? And I'm talking about the investors. I'm talking about the people who are just invested as workers. They start to freak out, and they start to say, well, we were looking at those numbers, and I'm not sure it's playing out the way we thought. You know, should we spend the rest of our money? Should I stay at this company? So, you know, and then all of a sudden it just really deteriorates when things start going bad or you get close to launch because you spent all of your budget, and you're wondering, oh my God, oh my God, oh my God, is this going to work out? Is it going to happen? And then all bets are off. You're not paying attention to charts, you're just fighting. I think the missing element is the human element, the simplicity of these ROI stories. Pandora is an example. So to me, it's an example because they recently came out and said, we want to be measured like old radio. It makes sense. I mean, it's a known market with a known size, with a known monetization strategy. You look at Spotify, it's a little less clear. It's a totally awesome application, but they lost 20 million in like 2009, 40 million in 2010. You know, they've had a great year this year, but how do you know it's going to work out? I don't know. I mean, let's look at some others. So, oh man, this is not getting easier. I mean, Twitter has been hugely successful, but you know, they made $200 million. They've been valued at $7 billion, so if you're kind of a student of this thing, something doesn't really compute. Oh, I'm speaking of not computing, I mean, how many of you have seen the SEC filing for Groupon? The first few pages are fantastic. I mean, it's a great read if you're into this stuff. So anyway, we got to go smaller. We got to look at something a little more basic. How about Instagram? Pretty cool. I mean, it's a camera app on the iPhone. There was already a camera app on the iPhone, so surely they've got something figured out. I'm going to need some more data. To me, it really comes down to this. It's kind of a Zen thing, right? It's about learning to be mindful of the constructs that we create to make ourselves believe that the return will happen. That's really the key missing piece in a lot of the companies I've worked with. It's not the stories we tell, because they're always fantastic. They have roughly 5-6 employees, from what I've heard. They have now 13 million users that they've gathered in 13 months. They took $7 million in investment. a company of that size and with such a simple story, it's so human, you can digest it. It just makes sense. So I hope if we can think more about the human element, maybe more of us will be able to recognize the real thing when we see it. Thank you.